Hey everyone, Aaron here, and this is another fan request review, and this is of Chobits. So this fan request review actually comes from my best friend in real life, Sean. He's the one that actually recommended me to review it, so I'm not going to take any credit for thinking to review this off the top of my head. Now, Chobits I consider one of the coolest romance stories because it's not your typical romance story. It's been done before, it's in terms of what it's about, but it's not typical the way it's been done. So Chobits starts off in a world where there are these advanced humanoid robots called Chobits. They are extremely advanced to the point that they look like human beings. They come in both male and female. Typically, a lot of people own the female versions because, there are a lot of guys who probably would want a female robot. And the robots come in different shapes and sizes, but most of them, at least the advanced ones, are humanoid sized. And it's interesting kind of premise already to start the show off with. Hideki, our main character, is a farm boy. He came from the farm countries of Japan and then moved into the city. And so he has to adjust to the life of a city slicker. More so he's now got to stop talking to himself out loud because he does that all the time because he's used to a more quiet and personal environment. He's got to learn how to make more money because he has no money at the beginning of the show. He's got a very quick part-time job. At the same time, he's a college student, so he has to go through college. Or not college student, I think he's actually going through prep school for college. But what happens pretty early on in the show is that he wants to buy a Chobit, but he doesn't have the money to. And when one day he's walking home thinking about how his life would be changed if he had one, he actually runs into, on the street, a fallen down in the trash Chobit. And he, of course, instantly takes advantage of that, takes her home, after some very interesting and comedic efforts to turn her on because her on switch is in a very personal location. He learns that she's not your typical Chobit. A lot of her memories have been erased. A lot of her data is not the usual data. One of his friends that comes over tells him that she's in a form that he's not used to seeing. It's very odd. And so that kind of sets off the grand motion of the show, and that you'll start seeing our main character, Hideki, get along with now his new Chobit that he names Chi because that's the first thing she could say is Chi. He gets along with her, and over the course of the show, it's about their relationship, and it's also about the concept of can romance exist between a robot and a human? And not to get kind of metaphysical on this, but it's not something that it's been done before in terms of concept, because there have been plenty of movies that have done that. Blade Runner, for example, was a movie that talked about at one point can a human fall in love with a robot, or can even people get along with robots? And so it's not technically original, but for an anime it was kind of original because you didn't see too many of these out there, and this is one of the first ones that really examined this concept. So what was cool about Chobits, I think, was beside the romance, it had some phenomenal animation. It was done by one of my favorite studios, Clamp, which they do a lot of stuff. They do also XX Holic, which was also another great show. I plan on reviewing that probably down in the future. They did Tsubasa, if anyone's ever seen that. But Chobits, I think, is still one of their staples because it's one of their best examples of a show that is just overall good. Nothing about the show was that bad except probably the ending, which was kind of weak. The manga had a better ending because it ended on a better note, I think, in terms of how our main characters get along toward the end. I'm not saying the anime had a horrible ending, it didn't. It just had one of those endings that it felt like it could have been a little bit more fleshed out, because it does end, and it kind of ends, not, I don't want to say abruptly, but it does end on it could have ended with a little more content. But overall, though, it wasn't a bad show. It was actually a great show. I consider it probably my top 50. I'm not going to give it my top 20 anime of all time, but I'll consider my top 50 because I did love the show back then. I love the manga. I actually own the whole manga series for this, and I remember buying that when I was younger. This show is pretty old. It's actually, I think, early 2000s, but yeah, it's still something that I watched recently. I didn't watch the whole series again, but I watched a little bit of bits and pieces here and there, and it's something that even today really looks good. It actually looks very good. It looks clean, and the voice acting, both Japanese and English, I think the English wins it a little bit, but they're both greatly dubbed. The soundtrack, Chobits has some iconic music, especially some of the background music. Cheese theme especially is one of the best, I think, examples of good music. Opening's a little hit or miss, but it wasn't that it wasn't that big of a deal. But yeah, it's a show that if I had to review A through F, I have to give it an A. It's not an A plus. It's almost there. It was almost there. The ending was what killed, I think, the A plus concept for the show, but it had a lot of great concepts. It had a great story. It had great characters, and you want to put the comedy on, and you want to put the serious tone on. And what I think was cool was Hideki as the main character. I think still is one of my top favorite characters because he shows the prime example of someone who doesn't need to be super cool, because he's not super cool. He's very humble because he's a farm boy, and he comes out very humble in the show. And what's one of the big jokes of the show and running gags of it is that how humble he is. He's always been, he's always like that, and it comes off as a cool character trait to me. I think because maybe I could associate with that, where sometimes I don't know everything about computers either, and I could feel Hideki a little bit because it's like, where does being in the time and also being out of the time exist? Where's the thin line between that exists? But yeah, that's it for this review. Hope you guys liked it. Like, comment, subscribe. It really helps me out. If you guys have any more fan request reviews, please keep them coming. This is actually my first review using the tripod, so I kind of thought this would be the best way to kind of set it up. And anyways, guys, until next time, until our paths cross again in the next review, have a good one, everyone. Bye.